Okay, so the whole tone scale. Uh, in this lesson, I want you to think of the whole tone scale as a sound more than a scale. That's going to be the point I'm going to try to make here, see if I can make an argument for that. There are a lot of videos on the whole tone scale, so hopefully I can find something that you maybe haven't thought of before. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole tone scale. Then I'm going to show you some licks that you can use so you get some tools that you can use when you're playing. And finally, I'm also going to talk about something called the double whole tone scale. And now you're wondering what that is. So do I. First off, the whole tone scale is a scale that consists of whole tones. So there are 6 of them, right? The first thing I suggest you do is try to sing the scale. It's not so easy. I remember in high school, I was in this music program and the teacher made us sing the whole tone scale and I couldn't do it, so it's really frustrating. It's different from the diatonic scale, our Western music, whatever, because every note, there's no tension and release as there is in the major scale. Some notes are pulling towards a resolution, and you can create chords from a major scale that has different feelings to them, different functions of different gravity, if you will. But the whole tone scale, every note has the same gravity. There's no tension and release. There's no tonic and subdominant. It has been used quite a lot in classical music, in jazz, even in pop music. Stevie Wonder used that scale. And obviously in film scoring, it's very popular. It gives you that kind of dreamlike feeling of dreaming, kind of. It can also be overused, so you have to be a little bit careful when you use the whole tone scale. So Debussy apparently heard this scale, so the story goes that he heard this scale at the World Convention of the World Fair, whatever it's called, in Paris, and supposedly some musicians from Bali performed music, and that's the first time he heard this scale. I'm not so sure. I haven't researched this. It could be a myth, but it could also be true. And even if it's not true, it's still an amazing story that you could actually hear music from another culture that you have never heard before. And Debussy obviously used this scale in his music. The best example is this tune or this composition called Voile, I think it's pronounced Voile. There you can really hear the whole tone scale. Django Reinhardt used this scale too. That song Rhythm Future. And obviously Thelonious Monk used this scale a lot. Problem is that Thelonious Monk had such a strong personality, such a strong style, such a unique voice that if you try to play like that, it kind of becomes a parody if you're not careful. So that's why I think a lot of people they stay away from the whole tone scale. They think it's gonna sound like you're trying to sound like Monk or something. But hopefully I can give you some ideas on how you can be creative with this scale. So first off, I'm gonna show you some licks and that you can use. So just get into it. So this first lick, it has some chromaticism in it. So I find that if you mix the whole tone scale with chromaticism, it becomes a little bit more interesting. So right, and remember, since the scale is symmetrical, you can move it around wherever, whole tones or major thirds or whatever, or tritones. Sorry. So let's see what this lick sounds like over a whole tone vamp. You could also double the chromaticism. I've heard players like Kurt Rosenwinkel play these kind of phrases. Okay, next lick is a very Django Reinhardt inspired lick. This lick doesn't have any chromaticism in it. It's just augmented triads, whole step away from each other. So let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so the third lick is a little bit more modern sounding. It kind of reminds me of something that Michael Brecker would play. That kind of thing, right? Okay, so now that you can sing the scale, you've heard some music with the scale, you're getting used to it, and you learn these licks. Some of you are maybe feeling that these licks are a little bit cliche, they're too obvious. How can I get more deep into this kind of augmented sound? So instead of thinking of it as a scale, we're going to try to think of it as a sound, or as a structure of notes, if you will. So I recommended this big book before, the Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns by Nicholas Slaminsky. It's a holy grail for jazz musicians and other musicians as well. It's not meant for jazz musicians, I don't think, but you can clearly hear players like Herbie and John Coltrane being influenced by this book. So on page 74, what he does, he divides an octave into, or several octaves into equal parts. So if you divide an octave into 6 parts, you get the whole tone scale. So what you could do is you play the scale, and then you add a note to each note. You attach a note to every note of the scale. So the most obvious thing were to play a note a half step above each note. On the PDF, you can see how I highlighted the notes that are the actual scale, and the offbeats are the notes between. Well, what do you get? You get a chromatic scale. if you do it the opposite, it would be like this, right? So I'm playing the scale note and then I'm playing a half step above. You could play a half step below instead. What's happening is that you're actually at the same time playing the other whole tone scale. Because a whole tone scale consists of 6 notes, there are 12 notes in our Western system, which means that there are 6 more notes that you're not playing, and that creates another whole tone scale. So there are only 2 whole tone scales. So you could think of it this way: when you play a chromatic scale, you're actually playing 2 whole tone scales, alternating between them. This might make you think of this in a different way than you used to. So instead of adding a half step between each note, I'm gonna add a major 7th. Here I'm also playing the 2 different whole tone scales, right? But in a totally different way. And now you're thinking, well, when am I gonna play like, I'm never gonna play like that when I solo, and it's too weird. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to open our minds of what you can do with these notes and how you can approach them, rather than just going. By thinking this way instead, new possibilities hopefully will emerge, so that you can experiment with that. Later on in the book, Sluminski gets really advanced, and another example here is a whole tone scale going up and the other whole tone scale going down, and then you mix them in a certain way. This is example number 3. So there are a whole tone scale, a C whole tone scale if you want, going up, and a B whole tone scale going down, and then they meet. Pretty cool, I think. So I promised I was going to talk about something called the double whole tone scale. And that's basically what that is, the 2 whole tone scales combined. So I'm not so sure about this, but I've seen examples of people talking about the double whole tone scale. I think Jerry Bergonzi does that in one of his books, where the idea is you play 4 notes from one of the scales and then 4 notes from the other whole tone scale. So the next example would be something like this. So that's 4 notes from the C whole tone, and then from the other whole tone scale, the first, the other. So another interesting thing is that you're actually getting, if you think of the C as a tonic, the D flat is the dominant, right? Again, it reminds me of stuff that Thelonious Monk would do, even though I'm not sure that he would think of it this way. So there you have it, some ideas, some whole tone ideas. See you next time.